Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the channel Yieldcast. This one is live from the road for a couple of us as Plant 22 is underway. Jeremy is still locked indoors for now, and we'll get to maybe why there's not a ton of activity in his area in a second. But I wanted to start first with you, Andrew Sikora. So we've got me, Matt Nelson. I'm your host in Central Iowa. Jeremy Miner, who is in Southeast Iowa. And we'll go to you first, Andrew, up in Northwest Iowa. How are the conditions up in the northwestern part of the state?
So things are starting to pick up in my territory. If you go from my western side, which would border up to South Dakota, Nebraska, and work east, field conditions are drier and better working from west to east, or more conducive for field activity. I go as far east as Kasuth County, so pushing towards that I-35 corridor. There's been a little more moisture on the east side. Field work is just starting, like today, maybe a few beans going in the ground over there. My western territory, more like Woodbury County, Plymouth County, there's been field activity going back, through the weekend. One thing that's been kind of a change, with the forecast and whatnot, a lot of beans have gone in the ground. I would say more beans have been planted in my territory than corn. People just being a little bit cautious, knowing that beans we can lose a little stand and whatnot and keep 100% potential. And that's kind of what, as a team, we've been recommending if guys feel like they need to get something done, to maybe start with beans. Corn in certain pockets has started probably yesterday and a little harder today. And part of that is due to, other than the cold temperatures, the soil conditions are very good.
Right.
So it's kind of making that decision. Do you want to potentially plant into wetter conditions where it's a little warmer, or potential wetter conditions where it's a little warmer, or, really nice field conditions that are a little cooler. Another thing that's gotten people going, where people have gotten the tillage equipment out and working up bean stubble, due to the dryness, things are working up really nice. So it's kind of hard to not keep going. And now the big thing will be, with rain in the forecast, how much do guys want to work out ahead? When should we stop ahead of the, the rain? And one other thing, with things being drier, things are working up a little finer, a little darker, maybe a little less residue, in part due to, the droughty conditions we had last year. And then we had moisture, kind of after maturity of the crop last year, which maybe helped with rot. So things, when they do work up a little drier and a little finer, where we have planted corn, maybe a little more concern, or we need to watch out for potential crusting if we'd get heavy rains,
For sure,
with field conditions. But in general, where guys are planting, they feel good about it. So we have good field conditions, maybe a little colder than we'd like, a little rain in the forecast. But in certain pockets where, we battle more wet conditions and dry conditions, guys are willing to take that chance.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, it just depends on the size of your operation. So if it takes you a long time to get the crop in, a lot of guys are just doing enough to make sure everything's working right, and we'll hit it a little harder on the backside of this weather system. So
yeah, that's good advice. If something's not working on your planter, right? You don't find out now, and it takes 5 days to fix. You're gonna be glad you found it now instead of next week.
Yep. So things are really getting going, especially in the western side of my territory, and we'll see a little rain chance in the forecast for tomorrow. Otherwise, it looks like pretty much a sure thing Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So, and we'll see, what kind of weather we have on the backside of that and when we can get back in the field. But
folks are probably about done in Southwest Iowa at this point. I love to give those guys crap.
Yep. So, I would guess down as you move Plymouth, Woodbury, I'd hate to give like percentages what's planted, but that would probably be, my most far along part of my territory. So
okay. Yeah, my folks are farming Woodbury County, Sikora. They're on corn today, and conditions are great. They've got they're almost too dry, and I'm gonna kind of touch on that too, because we dealt with that last year, Andrew, in western Iowa. So I cover Guthrie and Greene counties over to Iowa and Benton in the east, and we don't have that problem this year. We've picked up a lot of moisture, but Andrew, on those soils that are a little finer, last year we had some success actually engaging those row cleaners a little more aggressively, more than we would like, to move some of that dry soil out of the way. Is that something that you think guys are going to be looking to do again this year? On that really fine tilled soil, I guess I should clarify.
Potentially. So I've planted a little bit on our own farm, and I'm finding moisture. I'm also finding, like, where things are double worked, like on some headlands and whatnot, with the windy conditions we've had, especially if you combine it even with some sunshine, even though it's a little cooler. Conditions are definitely drier, on your headlands and things that are double worked like that. So maybe a little more concern there. I do think with the rain in the forecast, people, if we're finding moisture, probably not going to adjust things too much, but I guess we'll see. So
probably depends on what this rain brings over the weekend.
But that was definitely a practice that seemed to work last year and was pretty commonplace in the droughtier areas.
Yeah, almost a pseudo ridge till, right? Because your row cleaners, you normally want only moving about 30% of the time and only moving residue, not moving soil. But it definitely worked last year. That's not a concern here in central Iowa. So I'm on the road today. Really yet to see any activity. I saw a few planters going yesterday, but still yet to see one today. And that is because we are wet and also a little bit cold, like Andrew mentioned. So especially on the Des Moines lobe and just off of it, you add 2 or 3 inches here over the last 5 days. And as we start to get heat to warm up the soil, some of that heat also goes to drying it out. So for the fact of the matter is we're just a little cold here. Again, some of this ground has yet to be worked. Andrew, you mentioned tillage. There's a lot of work that's been done here in central Iowa, but I think there's still more that needs to be done in terms of some spring fertilizer and probably some spring tillage to finish the soil before planting. So I've seen a lot of sprayers running here. I think people realize with some moisture coming, it's a good time to get some pre's down, but not nearly as much planting activity here in the 30 corridor as I would have expected to see. But you start going west towards Carroll County, Andrew, kind of on the southern end of your territory towards the Missouri. There is a lot of activity, and they've been going there for a few days. So just not much going on in central Iowa, and it's really all related to moisture and coolness of the soil. The guys that are planting here in my territory are almost exclusively planting beans, which is a strategy that I agree with. We do have some people who need to cover corn acres, like you said, Andrew, who have certainly been talking to me and to their agronomists, and the conversation is really pretty easy. It's about starting with hybrids that are full of season and have the best early vigor and emergence, and then also just being cognizant of what your furrow looks like. I've been recommending to everybody, if you can't easily pierce that sidewall with a knife, you've probably compacted it a little too much. If you're carrying a lot of dirt and mud on your closing wheels, especially if you've got spikes, right, in muddy conditions, that's obviously a sign that it's maybe a little wet. But in beans, that sidewall compaction tends to be much less of an issue. So that's the report for us here. There's really not much activity, not nearly as much as I would have expected right around central Iowa. But if we dodge some rain here in the weekend, it'll definitely pick up. So now we've kind of gone from northwest to central. Jeremy, what is going on in southeast Iowa?
Southeast Iowa is about in the same boat as you, Matt. And same thing with Andrew. I mean, there's a little bit of everything going on. There's plenty of tillage to be done. I've seen more equipment move by my window and hydrous tanks, from the office, just things going back and forth. I've seen a lot of tillage work started probably yesterday late, but where it's fit, guys are rolling pretty hard today, just trying to get some ground turned up. There's a lot of urea that has to go on yet and get worked in, so there's plenty of that going on. There has been glad to hear and ready to report that plenty of beans are starting to go in now. So there is a lot more concern this year with the weather, which I'm happy to say that if you're going to do it, definitely get the beans in there now versus corn. But I've encouraged guys too, if it's fit, we just need to be careful. But if the soil's fit and they've got to get corn acres in, I'm encouraging guys to go with their best hybrids. Get your really your high vigor hybrids, your products with the best disease scores, those types of things. If you're going to do a little bit of something, make sure that we're going in with those. I mean, we just don't have a forecast that's going to encourage a lot of growth. I see a lot of these seeds that are going in the ground, maybe sitting a couple of weeks before they come out of the ground, unless something drastically changes here in the next week. I mean, we just really have, soil temps this morning in the low 40s. So we're just sitting there. Our overnight lows are in the 40s yet. I mean, we had 29 or 30 degrees here this morning. It was 24 yesterday. So I mean, we're getting out of that weather pattern. But turning to a wetter pattern. So I am concerned about some of that. I've encouraged guys just to review their seed treatments as well, making sure that we got a full boat seed treatment on there for, insects. I always worry about white grubs, wireworms, seed corn maggots, those types of things this time of year, just because, by calendar date, we should be, warming up and trending upward, but we're just not seeing it right now. So we just want to make sure that everything's covered. So I've seen a couple of planters going. A lot of guys, as you head towards the Mississippi River, I basically cover east central Iowa and southeast down to the Missouri border. As you get closer to the river, a lot of those guys run into sandier soils. They're drying out quicker and are ready to run. They're warming up a little quicker too. So that's pretty much what's been going on here. But yeah, planting advice for any guys that have called me. Plant your best score stuff first. But usually, if you're calling me and asking me if you should plant, there's probably an inkling already in somebody's mind that maybe they should be holding off a little bit. And guys are paying attention more to the forecast this year too. So guys know it's time to go, but it's just a matter of making sure that you have everything selected properly. If you're going to put it in, make sure those soil conditions are as good as you can get. If you have to go early and get something in, go with beans right now. If you have to get corn in, just make sure that the soils are fit and we got a good seed treatment on there. But so things are starting here. We're not as far along as the northwest corner, but we should be picking up here pretty quick.
Yeah, and I guess the last thing I wanted to hit was on the forecast. Obviously everyone's kind of trying to evaluate what to do because of it. There's chances of rain Thursday, Friday, but I think it's Saturday or maybe overnight Friday where there is some forecast for a kind of a big soaking rain, maybe a couple inches in places. So those of you wondering what that impact might be, Sikora already mentioned one, that's crusting on those really finely tilled soils, especially if with beans or if we're planting deeper to get to moisture, we put a lot of strain on that seed in terms of just energy reserves. I think another one could be if that rain turns out to be a lot colder than we're expecting right now. Jeremy mentioned the temperatures aren't really going to leave the low to mid 50s for the next week at least. So if we get rain Saturday, it turns out to be a high of about 40 that day, 45. Now we're starting to talk about a colder rain on those seeds that are maybe a day or two in the ground. We could see some chilling injury. And actually, most people don't talk about this, but that cold water can shock the cells of even emerged tissue, right? Stuff that's already germinated and is coming out. That's where we see some of that leafing out underground or some of that bizarre growth in the soil. So I don't know that the rain's going to be cold enough to cause those issues, but it's certainly on the table. And here in central Iowa, even, if it's enough rain in the storm we got the last couple days late last week, we had some ponding in fields. So I guess here on the lobe, that could also be a risk that water hangs out for a long period of time. If you've got seeds in the soil, obviously that's an issue. But at this point, I'm not sure that it's a huge cause for concern. I certainly wouldn't let it stop me from planting some beans here while the weather's nice. But it is something we definitely need to keep an eye on moving forward. So any parting words from you three before I cut you loose?
I guess one thing, if you haven't got anything done, don't feel like you're really falling behind, because we're not picking up much for heat units here over the next few days either. So when it's fit and this weather turns around, we should be able to get it in the ground pretty quick.
I guess one thing I would add to that is, and you guys talked about this earlier, is just, whenever time allows, get off and check your planter settings. We've seen there's a lot of residue out there. We had such a winter that there's not a lot broken down. We know that we can really change some soil temps. I saw some differences as much as 8, almost 10 degrees in soil temperature and residue versus no residue. So making sure those row cleaners are set just to clear that residue out of the way. Where you can heat up the row a little faster, that's going to help those seedlings get out of the ground and get off to a better start. So just check those settings whenever you can, and that'll help get that even stand emerged.
Well, happy planting, everyone. Andrew and Jeremy, thanks for joining. We'll try to get another one out next week where we maybe cover the other transect of the state and go from northeast Iowa on down to the other corner. And with that, we'll see you then.